All right. Hello and welcome everyone to today's NASW virtual event. Happy Equinox and happy Nowruz to those who celebrate. My name is Ben Young-Landis, social media editor for the National Association of Science Writers. Before I turn things over to our event host, I'd like to share the following reminders. This event is being recorded and the video will be posted later for NASW member access. And if you do not wish to appear in the recording, you can click stop video to keep your camera off throughout the event. Let's see. Auto-generated closed captions are available for this event. You can click on the closed caption button on your Zoom menu bar to activate. That's on your Zoom menu bar below. I'll be posting more helpful reminders on our Zoom chat box, including our event code of conduct links, social media handles for all our amazing volunteer event hosts. But without further ado, let me introduce the host of NASW's Advanced Copy column, Lynn Lamberg. So Lynn, the room is yours.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the second in a series of NASW author web chats. Lena Zeldovich, who initiated these chats, also serves as today's moderator. And Lena's book, The Other Dark Matter, was featured recently in NASW's Advanced Copy blog. And the blog, like this web chat, focuses on the craft and challenges of writing and publishing a book. So Lena will tell you now about today's topic and the panelists.
Hi, everyone. So as Lynn said, my book was featured in the Advanced Copy blog and it was published last year, and it took me such a ridiculously long time to find an agent, about 2 decades, but then it sold in 2 months. So after going through this often depressing agent-seeking journey and the general stressful general book publishing journey, I thought putting these panels together may help others achieve the same goal with a little less pain. So hence this panel. We have a hard stop at 1, I was told, with this panel. So I am going to introduce our panelists real briefly, and then we can, start talking about how does one look for an agent and whether one does even need an agent or not. So we have a great crew today, which includes a few first-time authors who got their agents recently and authors who published books before. And also we have authors who have agents and an author who doesn't. So our panelists include Melinda Vandermeer, who is a contributing editor at Scientific American and who also writes for the New York Times and Washington Post. Her first book, How to Raise Kids Who Aren't Assholes, was published last July. I gotta say, I wish this book was published 15 years ago because I would read it. Now might be a little bit too late because my children are just about grown up. Olivia Campbell has written for The Atlantic, The Guardian, The Washington Post, Smithsonian, Scientific American, and her first book, Women in White Coats, How the First Women Doctors Changed the World of Medicine, was also published last year. Sam Apple published several books and have written for many well-known publications. His recent book, Ravenous, Otto Warburg, The Nazis, and the Search for the Cancer Diet Connection came out last May. Wayne Brown has written for many publications and also published several books, most recent of which is The Forgotten Botanist, Sarah Plummer Lemon's Life of Science and Art. She's perhaps the most unique of this crew because she did it without an agent. So I'm going to jump in and ask my first question. Did you always know that you wanted to write a book? And how did you look for the agent for your first book?
I'm happy to jump in. I decided that I wanted to be a writer as an undergraduate and hoped to write a book. So I did an MFA program in creative nonfiction at Columbia. And I wasn't entirely sure what the path was after that, but I had to produce a thesis for that program. And that thesis ultimately became my book proposal. So that was really critical for me, because I don't know that I would have had the self-discipline at that stage in my life, or at any stage, to produce a manuscript of that length without the program. And then, in my case, one of my professors then put me in touch with her agent, and things went from there. So I didn't have to send out manuscripts widely. It was, maybe a somewhat unusual case, but I do think that, one of the reasons to go to a writing program beyond the instruction is to make connections with your peers and professors, and to be a part of a literary community where, that can help you find an agent.
Great.
I'm happy to share my experience, which is a little different. I certainly always have wanted to write a book, but it took me a very, very long time to figure out what that book was going to be. But I started reaching out to agents before I really even had solidified a book idea. And I looked up, basically, I went to the acknowledgements sections of some science writers' books that I really liked, and I looked to see who represented those science writers. And I started reaching out to different agents and just saying, would you be willing to hop on a phone call? When I first started doing this, I had a totally different book idea than the one I ended up with. But I said, would you be willing to have, a 20-minute conversation about this idea that I have and talk it through? And I connected maybe with 5 or 6 agents over the phone, and they, we kind of talked through ideas. And then it took many years for me to actually kind of settle on an idea, because I think with the first ideas, they were sort of like, I don't know. One of them was about ticks. They were like, who wants to really read a book about ticks? But I had a lot of conversations over the years with agents about different ideas, and eventually just sort of realized I really clicked with one more than the rest. And when I did finally come up with the book that sold, I reached out to him first and said, I have this idea that I actually think might work. And, would you be willing to talk with me? And then he talked with me, and I worked on a proposal after that with him. So I didn't write the whole book proposal, and then submit it to agents. I really started talking to agents very, very early in the process. So that was kind of my story.
Wow, that's so interesting. So even to this day, I thought that you're supposed to have a written book proposal before you can send it out.
Maybe you are. Maybe I just broke all the rules.
That breaking rules definitely works. And also never fails to amaze me to what extent everybody's story of finding an agent is different. So let's hear from Olivia.
Yeah, so I've been writing for a very long time. My first book was when I was like 7. I was writing Nancy Drew fan fiction. So after that, I kind of got into other things. I went into professional dance. I was in ballet. I got a journalism undergrad degree. And then I worked with Lynn in my MA in science writing. I decided I wanted to know more about science writing in particular. So I went to Johns Hopkins, and they allowed me to do an independent study toward the end of my degree program, and Lynn was my advisor. And basically, I wrote a book proposal. It didn't go anywhere. I just wanted to know that I could do it, kind of teach myself how to do it, basically. And Lynn walked me through it, that kind of thing. So that helped me a lot. I put that on the shelf after I graduated and was just freelancing, trying to keep food on the table, that kind of thing. I'm working piece to piece. Just trying to make as much money as possible, right? So I hadn't really thought about a book, because it's so much work to do that proposal when you're not getting paid. You don't know you're going to get paid for it, right? So to dive into the big amount of work was hard. So what prompted me to write this proposal? I actually probably about like 10 years ago, I wrote a proposal for like an environmental parenting book or something. I pitched some agents. I got no bites whatsoever. I was not ready to write a book, apparently, but recently, I wrote an essay about environmentalism and culture, how climate change was going to affect the stories we tell. And that was in Literary Hub. And after that piece came out, I had 2 agents contact me and say, I love this essay. I love the way you're thinking here. Do you have a longer project in the works? Can I be your agent, kind of thing? So I had to decide, first of all, which agent I liked. I know this is very unusual for agents to come to you. I was not expecting it. I did not have a book length everything ready to go. So I decided on my agent, and she is amazing. I love her. She's my biggest cheerleader. I would not be where I am without her. I'm very much an advocate for agents whenever anyone asks. So I basically wrote the proposal with her. I wrote the idea, and then she would, go through and workshop it and say, I don't know about this, she's tweaking. So it was about a year of work to write that proposal back and forth between me and her, and while I'm trying to freelance on the side, right, with my 3 little kids. It's a lot. So we finally get it into the shape that okay, this is where we want it to be. We send it out to publishers, and everyone liked it, except they said it was too broad. So then it was back to the drawing board. Basically, I worked with my agent again to say, okay, we need to massage this and narrow down the focus, so that it's a few more months of stripping out a few of the characters and a few of these people and saying, okay, I need to focus down. So my agent getting me through all of these points, she was vital to me. As soon as we went back out on the second round of submission, it was universal yeses. Everyone wanted this idea. So it sold in a preempt. So that was very lucky, but it was definitely, my agent was key through the whole process.
Mm-hmm. By preempt, you mean or multiple houses bidding?
It wasn't an auction. No, it didn't go to auction. The preempt means it won't go to auction. It means I was offered X amount of money for X rights, and they said I either accept it or I could say absolutely not. I'm going to let everybody else decide, and that might go to auction. But I accepted the preempt offer. Yes.
Okay. When do you want to tell us your story?
Sure. Yeah, I'm the or not part of this production, and I'm really looking forward to hearing what everybody else's stories are. I knew that at some point I wanted to write a book. I had a kind of a vague idea. And back in 1999, I was working for a newspaper as a copy editor and staff writer. I was also a book reviewer because it was a great way to get free books. And I ran across a book. At that point, I was in Knoxville, Tennessee. And I ran across a book called Remarkable Tennessee Women. And I read it, and I knew that I was coming back to Arizona. And I thought, I would love to read the Arizona version of this book. So this being more than 20 years ago, I picked up the phone and called the publisher and said, how can I get hold of the Arizona book? And she said, it hasn't been written yet, but if you send us a book proposal, we'll look at it. I didn't quite say, what's a book proposal? I said that after I hung up, and then went to the library and looked up how to write a book proposal and wrote one, and they accepted it. That book is now going into its 3rd edition, 22 years later. The next book was for Falcon. It was a trail guide to riding horses. And I realized that I was able to do the things I wanted to do without an agent. When it came to writing this latest book, The Forgotten Botanist, about Sarah Plummer Lemon, for whom Arizona's Mount Lemmon is named, I wanted to extend my reach from regional to national. And I wrote a book proposal, knowing now how to do it, and sent it out 23 times to a mix of editors and agents. Most agents didn't bother responding. 3 of them who did said, if this is a terrific proposal, you should teach proposal writing. But I can't sell this book to a commercial publisher because Sarah Lemon is not a household name, which to me kind of begged the question of how does somebody become a household name, but we'll move on beyond that. And most of the publishers that I was interested in turned out to be academic university presses. And I've been very, very happy with the University of Nebraska Press who accepted it.
Interesting. So I am kind of right there with you in terms of how long I have been looking for an agent, from like the early 2000s. It took me a really long time because in part because I had to learn a whole new different language to speak and write in. English is not my first language. And the first query letters that I sent to agents were about novels because I wanted to write novels. And I had written 4, and I had sent out all 4 to, I don't even remember how many agents. I know that with the first novel, I got 250 rejections, and then I gave up on it. And then I gave up on the whole fiction writing idea, went to a journalism school at Columbia, and that like worked like a charm. I should have done it earlier. How I found my agent is still kind of also different from everybody else's story. I think it always very personal. At that point, I wanted to write a book, but I was so convinced that I will never find an agent that I shouldn't even bother trying. I just felt like it was a curse on me. And so I found her when I wasn't looking. I found her before she became an agent. She had been an editor a book acquisition editor at Macmillan for over 10 years. And she bought science books, and then she decided she's done it for a long time and she didn't want to do it anymore. So she left her job and was figuring out what to do. And I met her kind of serendipitously at that point, and we were talking, and I said, you've been doing this for a long time. Can you send me a book proposal for a nonfiction science book so that I can figure out how to write them? And she said, sure, I have some old ones. By the way, what is your book idea? And we started talking. So while we kept talking, she joined a literary agency. And for the next, I want to say year, maybe 15 months, maybe a little longer, we worked on my book proposal and we shaped it into a proposal. And one day when I didn't expect it, she showed up to see me for a cup of coffee, and she whipped out a contract. And when I literally went home dancing because I didn't expect this to happen. I didn't think it would ever happen. I kind of view the whole thing as an exercise, and there I had an agent. And then when proposal was ready, she sold it in 2 months. So I guess it paid off. So I guess this is, my way of telling everybody who is looking for an agent right now and is ready to jump out the window, don't. Something completely unique will happen to you too, not like everybody else. And one day you'll have that contract. Okay, moving right along. How do you work with the agents? I think we've got a little bit of a sense from some people that their agents are very hands-on, maybe others are not. So let's hear from everybody. What's your typical modus operandi on when you're working on a proposal and when you're working on a book? Anyone?
I'm happy to jump in again.
Jump in.
I have had pretty different experience from book to book. My agent is Dan Lazar at Writer's House, and I've done some adult books with him and some picture books for young children. And in the picture books in particular, he's been very hands-on and really helped me shape the ideas and given me a lot of great advice and line editing, and really doesn't like to send it out unless he feels that he's helped me get it into the right form. But my most recent book, which you mentioned, Ravenous, is a science book, and in that case, it began with a magazine article I had published, and then an editor saw the magazine article and reached out to my agent. And that's another thing. I know Olivia mentioned her work. If you're looking for an agent or an editor, just getting work out there is a great first step. So in that case, the editor came to my agent and said, I'm interested in having Sam expand this article into a book. Would he be interested? So there wasn't as much need for my agent to edit at that point. And then my editor at the publishing house did a very close line edit, which doesn't always happen. So my agent had a little bit less of a role, but I know that he typically does a lot of editing. Some agents are very hands-on and others are not. But I think the best ones take an investment in the process often and do a lot of editing. But can also be frustrating at times because I'm excited to have something sent out and have to go through another round of editing. But it ultimately is a good experience.
Mm-hmm. Melinda, I see you nodding.
Yeah, I'm just thinking back to the to the phase when I was working on the proposal and we were going through so many edits, and it felt like that process took so long, and I was so ready for the proposal to go out there and like, is this even going to sell? And like, what if somebody else puts in a proposal that's similar to mine before I do? And and I was so nervous about how long it took. I just remember, that's why I'm laughing. It felt like it just took forever, but I'm ultimately very grateful that it went through the edits it did. So sorry, that was a little bit of an aside. In terms of how I've worked with my agent, so my agent is Larry Weissman with Larry Weissman Literary, and he works closely also with his partner, Sasha. They're both, I kind of have two agents. It's kind of fun because they work together. And so I would say certainly the time when I was working with them the most was when I was working on my proposal. They had a very specific recipe for a proposal that they wanted me to follow, which is, a 8 to 10 page introduction / overview, like, why does this world need this book? What is it going to be about? And then sample chapter, one sample chapter and chapter summaries for each chapter, and then a bio. So there's no marketing section in his proposals, but marketing information goes into my bio essentially. So anyway, we worked a lot on getting the proposal where it should be, and that took months. And then there was, he was he used to be in the publishing side, and he was very aware of like the schedules of editors and when's a good time to put a proposal in and when is not. And I remember we were around the fall time, and he was like, well, we don't want to do this right before Thanksgiving. And we don't want to do it between Thanksgiving and Christmas. So we want to wait till January. And I was like chomping at the bit to get this out there. But ultimately, he was making very smart choices. And also just, he was very good at knowing like which publishing houses, which editors to pitch to. And I really appreciated his knowledge of like that side. But then during the writing process, he was really like, we were out of touch for a year and maybe more really. He would check in maybe occasionally, but honestly, I was mostly just talking with my editor at that point while I was writing the book. And even while we were going through edits, my agent was just pretty hands-off during that entire process, which I didn't really mind. I didn't feel like I needed him that much because I was just working mainly with my editor. And now he's back in my life again a lot because we're doing a lot of selling, the book's getting translated into 7 languages. And so there's all of the contracts that he's dealing with now, which I'm so grateful that I do not have to deal with because I don't understand any of it. Basically, I'm like, what are we selling? What's happening? Like, and he's in touch with all of these different publishing houses in different parts of the world. But yeah, those are the 2 parts of the process that he's been very involved in: the proposal writing, getting it ready, getting it out there, and then now like all the sub-rights, foreign rights stuff.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I don't know, Olivia, do you have anything to add?
It's very similar to what my experience with my agent was. It was very hands-on during the proposal process, and then once you get the editor, once the house kind of takes over, and you're just back and forth with the editor. The next point when I needed my agent was, she was like, tell me when they give you cover ideas, when they do the cover art, and this, I want to be involved with this. If you really don't like it, you're going to need me to advocate for you, that kind of thing. And I've also used my agent for selling pieces to print magazines as well, not just books. So I get in touch with her for other things as well. She won't let me sign contracts that are good for me. I don't know everything about contracts. I try, but I trust her to be that liaison. She knows the business side and the editorial side, right? So she knows about writing. She knows what sells, but she also knows what's good for me as a writer, as her client. So I always trust her to be my advocate. And for her to know what's going to sell. Like if she tells me this, this isn't a good idea, this is a good, like when we went through second book ideas, what that process was, give me a list of ideas with a couple paragraphs under each one, and then I'll talk through what I think of those. So that was, the second book has been so much easier than the first. Now that I know how to write a book proposal, right? It didn't take a year this time, it took like 3 months. So second book is awesome.
Cool. In your case, how'd you work with your editor?
Well, I think one piece of advice that I would give writers is to, and we're always told to network, go to conferences, meet everybody that you can meet. I went to a conference called Nonfiction Now that was in Phoenix, and I met the assistant acquisition editor. Make sure that you have your elevator pitch, your one breath elevator pitch branded into your brain. And so I introduced myself, gave my one breath elevator pitch, and she immediately wrote down her boss's name on a business card and said, contact Bridget Barry, she's going to want to know about this. So I went home, I honed my query letter, which had already gone out many times, but every time I sent out the proposal, I tweaked it for whatever audience I was sending it to. And Bridget responded immediately and said, please send the full proposal. So again, I tweaked the full proposal, which was 100 pages. It did include a marketing. I had done my homework to figure out what books would be comparable. And I had an expanded table of contents with 2 to 3 sentences summarizing each chapter. And so I sent that to Bridget, and she looked at it and said, and this was painful, if you can eliminate the first 7 chapters, I'm happy to accept this. And she was absolutely right. What needed to happen was to take that early material and blend it into where it was relevant in the rest of the manuscript. It ended up being a much, much better book. She then read the manuscript, and she didn't do a really specific line editing. I work as an editor, so I like to think it was already pretty clean, but all of us need editors. It doesn't matter if you are a paid editor or not. And it then went to a freelance copy editor after she had done her magic with it, and I made all the changes that she suggested. One thing that helped enormously is that I'm a member of the Authors Guild, and as part of your $140 membership fee, the Authors Guild will look at your contract, and for somebody who doesn't have an agent and who's a freelancer, this is huge. I mean, they went through the University of Nebraska contract and they suggested 19 changes. The University of Nebraska Press accepted 18 of those. And the only one they didn't accept was, I was hoping to get royalties more than once a year, because it would be nice. But they said that that's just part of the university system and they can't do that.
Wow, that's really super helpful. Like even, for me, and I have an agent who reads all this impossible legalese for me, but I didn't know the Authors Guild does it. And that's actually good enough to join, because you can never, an extra pair of eyes never hurts.
And they explain it to you in English rather than legalese, and it's hugely helpful.
Okay. Wow. Okay. So in my case, my agent is incredibly hands-on. She works with me to conceptualize the proposals. She asks all the questions. She makes edits. She also reads all the chapters that I write before they go to the editor, which I find helpful because she cleans up some stupid mistakes, and also again asks questions that to me at that point might be so obvious that I figured like the whole world knows it, but apparently no. Yeah, in terms of legalese, agents are super important because there's things that might appear in your book contract that you definitely don't want to have on there, that kind of like paint you into the corner and take your rights away and whatnot. I'm curious to ask all of you, do your agents work with you in terms of getting you speaker gigs, in terms of helping you place excerpts, or maybe they do something else that I don't even know about?
My agent did work on excerpt placement, and they're like in contact with me about hey, what's the publisher doing to publish it? Give me an idea about how many radio gigs they've gotten you, how many, articles are you getting out of it. So she was back in touch again, once that portion comes out. She wants to make sure that I'm getting all the publicity I need to get the publicity attention I need from the publisher, because that's, can not always be the case. So it's been good for her to have her to advocate for me. My agent is Zoe Sandler at ICM Partners. They're a huge company, so they have a lot of agents. If my agent just went on leave, and so I had another person come up, and they have someone in London for the international rights. So I have lots of different people I know I can reach out to. But yes, she was definitely making sure that I was getting attention from the publicity during that section of the writing of the book.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Anyone else?
Yeah, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Okay, all right. Okay. Yeah, my agent was not involved in the excerpting process. That was all my publisher. So they had like a sub-rights person who was dealing with that, and my editor was involved too. As far as speaking goes, I kind of experimented with having my agent be involved in negotiating some speaking gigs at first. And then I realized that I didn't really need his help for that. And he's taking 15% commission out of my fee. So I was like, I think I can handle this from now on. And he wasn't really helping me get speaking gigs either. So yeah, he hasn't really been super involved in that kind of thing. And I don't involve him in articles either, unless, yeah, no, I really haven't involved him in, pitching or negotiating anything with regard to article contracts for whatever reason. I probably could. But I feel like I'm okay doing that on my own.
Okay, Sam?
Yeah, my agent doesn't really get involved with anything other than the books, but with the books, he really stays involved quite a bit at the last stage of the process. I also sort of lose touch with him as I'm writing, but at the end, he makes sure that I CC him with all the communications with the publisher. And if he feels like they're not being aggressive enough with the marketing, he calls a meeting and we all get together and discuss it. So even when he's not chiming in, I feel like I have somebody advocating for me, just being there on CC and sort of keeping track of everything that's going on. And whenever he feels that they're not doing enough, like for the paper, even little things, the paperback editions coming out and they didn't redesign the cover and he thought they should have. So he got involved at that point. So really is nice to have somebody who's involved in that way. And, with other, I think, if I came to him and asked him to send something to a magazine, I think he would, but, just usually the money is relatively small and, it's not necessarily worth the agent's time to do that for 15%. So I try not to ask for that, but sometimes, even though he's not involved in the process, I just have a question about my freelance contract. So I bounce it off him, and that's very helpful. And another way he's helped, as I mentioned before, I've done some picture books. That really only happened because I happened to know that he did picture books, or else I wouldn't have even thought to do it. And I said, can I show you one? And he said, sure.
Okay. Well, here's a fun question. Rejection letters. They're demoralizing and depressing, and not only the ones that you get from agents, but the ones that you get from editors when your agent is pitching your book. How do we all survive that? What do we all do?
I aim for 100 rejections, and I just recently broke a 37 rejection streak, and I was very glad. This is for a poem. I was very glad to get the poem accepted, but I was kind of disappointed because now I have to start back over again at 1. My feeling is you cannot take them personally. You just have to keep sending them out.
Okay.
Yeah, you have to remember that it's not you they're rejecting. It's just this thing you spent a year and a half working. No, it's hard. I was actually more concerned about how I would feel during the editing process when I saw that red, on my manuscript that I've been working so hard on. The proposal feedback from editors, that it was a little bit easier. It was kind of, I think it was harder for me when I had a little bit of interest and we had some back and forth going on, and then ultimately they said no. That was harder. than the just flat out, no, this isn't right for us. My favorite rejection was the publisher that said this is like too inspirational. These women are like too, like what do you want? Like a sad story? I'm sorry, like I wouldn't know about these women if they hadn't been successful at, you know, getting a medical degree. I would, the story wouldn't be out there for me to find them. So I don't know. But yeah, you kind of have to find a way to laugh them off and just trust that eventually it's going to happen.
Okay. Oh, well.
I'll just chime in that
Yes,
when I had a book go out that got a bunch of rejections at first, and my agent kept forwarding me all the rejections. I was just thinking, like, I don't really need to see them. He can just, you know, tell me no, but he always did forward them. So, and I was thinking about telling him to stop, but I didn't want to seem like I was too fragile, so I didn't say anything. But I just kind of glanced at them without reading them carefully.
You know, I'm always on the fence. And my agent asked me, do you want to see rejection? I was like on the fence, like, well, maybe I can learn something from them. And sometimes maybe you can, I think more often than not, they just kind of, you know, more depressing than anything. I do have a favorite rejection letter that I got from an editor for that, my first, for the proposal for my first book. The topic of the book was kind of wacky. So we did expect rejection. So it was about how human waste isn't really waste at all, but actually a super versatile substance that can be converted into all kinds of things, and actually should be converted into all kinds of things, like put back to nature for the circular economy. But there was a lot of word poop in it and stuff like that. And so the rejection letter that we got from one of the bigger publishing houses was this: we love the proposal, we love the idea, we love the writing. We just don't know how to discuss it at the editorial meetings. So sorry, we're going to pass. So, okay. So we are actually approaching 12:40 here in the ET time zone. We were going to open it up for questions. So we might as well do that.
And Lena, we have one question already from Sandra in the chat. She
Okay.
asks, what is the general feeling about querying agents, simultaneous queries or one at a time?
Simultaneous, as many as you can. They're going to take forever to answer, and many will not answer at all.
Speaking as one of the silver-haired participants here, I think there's a topic that's kind of the elephant in the room, which is whether or not there is ageism among agents, and are they more willing to take on younger authors than ones who might not live long enough to do a lot more books. So when I do a submission, I put in something in the postscript that as a seasoned author, this is a simultaneous submission. And I just think it's ridiculous when a publisher said, oh, we want the exclusive look at this for 6 months. I think that's just brutal and unfair.
Okay, I see another question here from Kate Horowitz. What are some red flags to avoid when vetting agents? How do you know you found the right one for you?
I can speak a little to this because
Sure.
when I was talking with multiple agents, as I said, I was talking to a lot over the phone. One thing I did do when I was sort of narrowing down who I wanted to work with is I asked if I could talk to some of their clients, some of their other book clients, to see whether, they had anything negative to say, basically. And when I did that, I did get some interesting insight. I remember there was one agent who, for whatever reason, when I was speaking to, I just didn't get a great feeling. He was very pushy. He was really trying to push me into working with him in a way that just felt like it didn't make me comfortable. And I did reach out to somebody he'd worked with, and she didn't exactly warn me against him, but she said some things that really made me, I can't remember exactly what she said, but it was definitely enough to think, okay, I think there's some red flags here. So I definitely recommend doing that. If you're considering working with an agent, just ask, like, can I talk to one of the authors that you work with, and, hear a bit about how you work, and you can get some good insight there. So, I mean, trust your gut. If you just don't like the person, or you're not having a good conversation, or you feel it's prickly in some way, definitely trust that gut. And then if you're not sure, see if you can get more intel from other people who've worked with them.
Yeah, I definitely reached out to clients of both of the agents who were interested in working with me. I maybe it's not fair, but I looked at who the more successful books were. Books that I'd heard of from one agent. Maybe I hadn't heard of the other authors. But the biggest thing for me, the red flag with one of them was she said she was an old school like handshake contract person. And that was a big red flag for me. Like, no, I want an actual, I'm signing a paper contract. This is not like, I don't want to do it that way. I want to actually sign something. And I that was the person who I actually met in person. The agent I went with, I only met her on the phone, but we definitely clicked. And you definitely want someone who has the same vision for your work. I think that was key for me. That wasn't gonna kind of change or filter or adjust, what I wanted to do. As much as I want to write a more sciencey book, now I'm kind of stuck with the historical niche, and I have a whole proposal written on the placenta. But my agent's like, you have to write another history book first. Once you have built up your audience, then you can write whatever you want. So this is the other thing my agent is great for, telling me, just wait, just calm down, don't start querying other publishers just because you want to do this thing. But yeah, she's great.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's kind of, I think you feel it like when I found mine, even though it's not that I had a choice between different ones, but I think by then it was so clear to me that we click, and she wasn't gonna, change my work or whatever. I also had a feeling she kind of believed in me when nobody else believed in me up to that point. That, yeah, to me, it was like absolutely clear that, I found my home. Okay, we have, anyone wants to add to this, or are we good? There are more questions coming up. If you don't have an agent but need a representative to handle other rights, how would you handle this? Other rights meaning like translation rights or
Possibly the performance rights. And again, I would recommend the Authors Guild, because they can explain all those other rights and whether or not you want to keep some of them. For example, for my book, I actually kept the performance rights. I don't know that anybody is ever going to make a movie out of The Forgotten Botanist, but you don't know what's going to happen. And I just thought, okay, I know nothing about performance rights, but if that comes up, I'm happy to learn about it. And I'm coming across like some kind of control freak that I want to have my hands on everything. That's not quite completely the case, but I would recommend the Authors Guild.
Okay. Well, I'm curious. Let's say you have a book proposal and you're sending it out, and you're still sending it out to agents, and you're getting a no. At what point do you give up, or do you rewrite your proposal? If you don't have an agent, there's no sounding board, like a professional sounding board, other than your friends and colleagues. So just curious, at what point do you give up, or you change your proposal, or what? Just curious what thoughts anybody might have.
Well, I'll jump in on that. And I saw that Mary and Timothy had their hands up as well. So there might be some other questions, but I feel that, you can't go on forever, but, as we've heard in this conversation today, that, you can strike out with an editor agent many times and still find success the next time. So it's hard to know what the right number is, but I don't know, maybe, if a certain number of agents respond in the same way, that's a sign that you're getting consistent feedback that something isn't working. So that might be a reason to change. But if you're getting different feedback, or you feel like you just haven't met somebody who really gets you, I think you should keep trying. I find that even, very good editors and writers and people with literary sensibility just often just have different tastes and disagree. And, you just have to believe in yourself enough and keep looking for that person who clicks with you.
Okay, you said someone had
Yeah,
raised their hands. Oh, yeah.
I'm Mary Jane Schneider. I'm wondering, what I'm interested in writing actually is a memoir of a time when I was in grad school. And so it's not exactly a science book, although I've written science textbooks. But anyway, my question is, my kids would like me to write this memoir anyway. And so I would write the whole thing first. And then if I wanted to try to sell it, how would I find an agent? Is there a list of agents that specialize in different types of books?
I can maybe help with that one. There is a website called the Manuscript Wish List, and they list both editors and agents. And you can filter them out by, by horror, by memoir, by biography, by history, by science, and look for agents or editors if you don't want to go the agent route. So it's manuscriptwishlist.com. Very useful resource.
Okay, and so I would basically have the whole manuscript written, although obviously I would expect to have feedback from the agent, presumably an editor, but is it a good idea to have the agent before you send it to an editor, for instance?
I would recommend writing a book proposal, even if that particular house does not require one for a memoir, generally because memoir is nonfiction, a book proposal is required. Plus, I think it's a really good exercise to get to know how your manuscript fits in with what else is out there. So I would do the book proposal, and you want to write the book anyway for your kids. I would say go ahead and write it.
Right, but do the proposal separately to send out to whoever. Yeah, okay.
Yes, because you want to know what the comps are. In other words, is your memoir similar to The Glass Castle, or is it similar to what else is out there that's been published in the last few years? I think it educates you as to where your manuscript fits, and I think that's really valuable.
Okay, good, thanks.
Okay, Timothy.
Yeah, I just wanted to, my name's Tim Jorgensen. I've written a couple of science books for Princeton University Press, and I have an agent who has been extremely valuable in that process. I just wanted to mention something that's a little bit different for science books than perhaps other genres, is that there's a limited number of publishers that consider these types of books. And if there's like maybe 24 possible publishers for any particular science book at tops. And one problem is if you've already, and half of those are probably academic presses. Yes. If you've already shopped the book around and then you try to get a literary agent, that's like the kiss of death, because she can't go, generally the publishers don't consider the same manuscript twice. So if you've already shopped it, for example, to Princeton University Press and they said no, then that's off the list for her. And so she doesn't have the opportunity to polish your proposal and get it to the right person at Princeton University or whatever the publisher is, and give it its best shot. You've already blown that. So there are far more literary agents that handle science than there are publishers who handle science. So my advice would be to research the literary agents as intensely as possible, so you find the agent that is just, in the way that I approached it was, I read a whole bunch of books that were similar. And usually in the end, in the acknowledgements, they say, oh, I want to thank my agent, so-and-so. Now you already know that agent handles that type of book. And then you can write like a personalized letter or email to that person and describe why this is the perfect book for this particular agent, And I think that would be better, because if you poison the well by looking for agents and publishers at the same time, I think you're never going to end up with an agent. They're going to say, this person has already fielded this. I can't do that again. That's just my experience.
Interesting. Interesting. So we have another question from Marla Broadfoot, who is, it's a really interesting question. Marla, do you want to just ask it rather than me read it? No?
Sure.
Oh,
Hey.
okay.
Hey, Lena.
Hey.
Yeah, so I was going to say that I was thrilled to get my agent. In the before times, I had a proposal. We sent it around. It didn't get accepted. I was going to revise it, and then I lost my nerve for it and kind of fell out of love with my idea. Now I have a new idea. She was thrilled by the idea and thought it was great. But now we're kind of in this period where I want to get moving on it. And I have sent her just a few things to respond to, as like chapter summaries and the like. And she's super busy, loves the idea, get back to you ASAP. And there's a lot of that. And I did do the groundwork before getting her, talk to other of her clients. They all loved her. And I'm sure they've had similar experiences too about her being busy. But I'm just kind of at this point now of like, I need more from her, but I don't want to be too needy, and because I am prone to neuroses, as many writers are. So I don't want to like let her see that side of me, but then again, come on, let's get moving. And so I'm wondering if anybody has any advice of how to kind of work on that relationship. I'm not at the point of wanting to sever it really. And start over, but I also want to work on it and get this thing moving.
How long had the gaps in communication been?
Like I think it was a month, the last one. I mean, she'll write me back right away and say, this is great. I look forward to seeing this. I'll get back to you ASAP. Mm-hmm. And then nothing. And then she'll sit, and she's evidently thinking about me because she'll forward me things, but not necessarily respond to my question.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's a good question.
Have you thought about giving her a deadline? Like, that sounds like weird, but I've heard people doing this when they pitch something. Hey, I'm pitching this. It's a time sensitive thing. If I don't hear back from you by X date, I'm gonna, go to another publisher. So I'm wondering if something like that could work with an agent. Like, I'd really like to hear back from you by this date. I'm excited about this project and I'd like to get it moving forward. And or time is running out on this project's a time sensitive topic. I really wanted to get moving, something like that.
When someone beats me. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I don't know, sometimes like these days I even think that everybody's still a little bit in the funk from what's happening in the world. I know it definitely affected my brain, so maybe that is part of the problem. And it's hard to tell. I think a month is, quite a bit. I think, I wouldn't necessarily, set a deadline, but I would try to be a little bit more firm, saying something like, again, like, it's a timely topic, I want to put it out before somebody beats me to it, something like that, something to kind of, show that if we don't move soon enough, then we can lose something, something at stake.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Would it be easier to get on a call with her if you're having trouble hearing back from her, like, that's, if I need my agent, I call her, you know what I mean? Like, do you think you could say, I would like to arrange a call with you on X date to discuss this and, get answers from you, get feedback from you? Do you think it's easier for her to answer on a call than in an email maybe?
I think that's a good idea. I think that might work. And I did try the deadline thing. And I've done that with her before, where I was applying for a fellowship and I just said, do you want to see my application? And I'm applying for another fellowship now. And I sent it to her just a couple of days ago and she hasn't responded to that. So I think a call might be the better approach for her rather than her having to type out all of her thoughts, because I really connect with her very well on the phone. It seems like she really gets what I'm trying to say, even if I haven't expressed it well in words on the page, which is what I really liked about her. And she wanted to fast track the idea. She was so excited about it, she wanted to fast track it. So maybe there's something else going on too. And I have to admit that, yeah, the pandemic is a big part. I appreciate that comment too, because I haven't, even when she said fast track it, it's not like I immediately then sent her a whole proposal. Like, you know, I had family and issues and caught COVID and all of that. So I feel like I'm willing to give some grace, but also I was hoping an agent would be someone who would be giving me deadlines and not vice versa.
Yeah.
I mean, I will say I had this same, I was pulling my hair out in the it was like a 6-month process of going through my proposal. And I was like, why is this taking so long? And I would wait a month too before I got replies back. And I was like this is, I mean, I was at the point I think where you are. And I don't know, I talked to other people and some people were like, book publishing is just like a totally different pace from magazine publishing. And if you're used to magazine publishing, like it really does feel like you're in this whole like totally alien universe. And so I dealt with it, and in the end, I'm like very happy with how things turned out, but I was so frustrated. And I don't know, like, I don't know. I think some agents do just work this slowly, even when like you're so excited and for whatever reason they're, going this glacial pace. But I don't know, there are probably some agents you could find that move faster, but I just want to say, like, I did have this experience too. And I do think there's some normalcy to it. But whether or not you want to deal with it or try to find somebody who's faster, that's not, I don't know.
No, it's really helpful to hear that someone else has dealt with it as well. So then it's not, that I'm just in this dysfunctional relationship, that it can exist out there too, with people who had books that became very successful. That does help to hear that.
Okay. Well, Ben is warning us that we've got 3 minutes remaining on the hour. So I think I want to ask the last question. Do you know if your agents are open to submissions?
I don't know if mine is, but like I said, the agency is huge. So when I have sent her people before, she has, if they're maybe not quite a fit, or if the topic, like maybe it's memoir or something different, she would send them to someone else in the agency, is what she's done in the past. If she read it and said, not quite, she would pass it to someone else in her agency.
Okay.
I don't have an agent, but I would say that University of Nebraska Press is very open to submissions. And they're obviously very interested in science. My book is under the Bison Books imprint, which is for general readers. And as I say, I've been very, very happy with them.
And a lot of the agents, I think, are listed on Publishers Marketplace, and say if they take submissions or not. I believe last time I checked, my agent, Dan Lazar at Writers House, was open to submissions. But that is a good resource for checking, which authors they represent and whether they're open.
Okay. My agent is definitely open for submissions, and I know she's actively looking for more authors, and you can find her info on, under my write-up about my book on the NASW page. And we've got 2 minutes of 1 minute now left. So I think we might as well. I'll thank everybody for joining in and sharing your stories and insights. And we hope to do more of these in the near future.
Thanks for having me.
All right.
Thank you. This has been great.
Okay. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Lena. Thank you, panelists. We appreciate your coming. If you're an NASW member whose book will be published soon, please submit information about your book for advanced copy, and the submission guidelines link is in the chat.